Let's cut to the chase. I really like Lupin III. Now that's just the basic answer. Lupin III has been one of the biggest brain rots I've had this decade. I've already talked about this anime twice in the past. Once when I looked at Mushihimesama, and the second time with Finny when we took a look at Castle of Cagliostro, which I think you should definitely watch. The video specifically. You can also watch the movies too, but I'd really love it if you'd watch the videos as well, or the reviews, or whatever they're called, I guess. If you're new to the channel and are just finding it through this video, allow me to give you a quick recap of where we are so far. Lupin III is an anime that began in the 70s with part 1, then part 2 happened from 1977 to 1980, but in between, we have Mushihimesama, which released in 1978, and Castle of Cagliostro in 1979, and after that, part 3 finally began in 1984 and ended in 85, and between is another movie, so yeah, that's where we are now. Even if the anime is 5 decades old at this point, this is still one of the coolest anime series I've ever watched. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but in and of itself, it's something at least every anime fan should experience once in their life. I could go on about how great this anime is, but even if I really like it, I can't deny that there's at least one piece of media you're a fan of that has a black sheep in it. And you know what? You're exactly right, because there's one movie that I really don't care for, and that is 1985's Legend of the Golden Babylon. Why this film exactly? Why do I not care for this film, you might be asking? Well, I don't know. Why don't we find out in this video? I guess, you know? You're probably looking at this cover and thinking to yourself, when was there a glorious pink jacket? There was always green, red, and blue, and that was said and done. Although, if you want me to be honest, the pink jacket is probably the most superior color. Even if, you know, it's the black sheep of the Lupin series. Well, allow me to take you back to the glorious year of 1984. Part 3 of the anime would begin airing on Yomiuri TV from March 3rd, 1984, all the way until December 25th, 1985. That's over a year and a half of Lupin content airing on TV. Despite this, it would only run for about 50 episodes, and that was said and done. Compared to part 2 of the anime, which aired over 150 episodes, this feels like a downgrade in and of itself. Another thing that feels off is that in part 2 of the anime, there was always something goofy happening, but it also wasn't afraid to show more serious moments of itself, especially during the latter half of the show. In part 3, it wasn't afraid to show its goofy side, but of course, it still had its serious moments, but it always felt like part 3 leaned into being more of a slapstick show than anything. Which, fine, I guess, but it feels like the writers missed the point of part 2. Lupin is this cunning, goofy thief that goes on all sorts of heists to collect treasure, and it's not afraid to have its serious moments as well. Near the end of its run in July of 1985, the first Pink Jacket film would be released titled Legend of the Golden Babylon. This would be the only Pink Jacket film to release until 2023's Lupin III vs. Cat's Eye, which I really want to look into someday. The animation looks weird, but it's an adequate enough plot. Much like the Pink Jacket series, this movie tends to have a mixed reception with the fandom, where you either love it or hate it, and although that is true, part of me kinda has a love-hate relationship with this movie, where there's one side of me that likes it for the visuals, music, and animation, and another part of me dislikes it for how poorly aged it is and how it tries to be like the other two movies, but ultimately fails. For you see, Mushihimesama has nudity, which I will not show here, but is mainly used for artistic purposes. Meanwhile, in Golden Babylon, there is nudity, but it's played for shits and giggles, I guess. Anyways, you're probably looking at this title and wondering, how can I defend this movie for that reason alone? Well, sit back and relax as I explain the plot of this film. But I'm not doing it alone this time because I got the backup plan up my sleeve. Hey, SpacemanFinn, it's been a while, so yeah. It's been a while since we last talked about Lupin III, but I might need your help on another thing if you're interested. So give me a ring back. Wait, this isn't a voicemail. Hey, do you want to do that collab review anyway, or? Well, guess I'm doing it alone this time. This is Lupin III, Legend of the Gold of Babylon, but I give a brief summary of the plot because I'm not going over it all. The film opens with the song Manhattan Joke, all while different shots of New York City are shown, and admittedly, it isn't something like Mystery Amamo's opening sequence with the cloning process, or how Castle of Cagliostro opens up with Lupin and Jigen traveling to Cagliostro. But it still gets the job done, I guess. I kinda have a soft spot for the opening sequence. The shots paired with the music make it all the more enjoyable. Anyways, to get back on track, Lupin and the gang travel to New York for some reason. I don't think it's ever explained why, but we do know that not only is Lupin being hunted down by Zenigata, but now he has to deal with a bunch of hitmen led by Marciano, who wants to steal the treasure of Babylon for himself. Along the way, Lupin meets an old lady by the name of Rosetta, who's surprisingly helpful to Lupin on his quest to retrieve the Gold of Babylon. So, to give a brief summary, Lupin and the gang are trying to find the Gold of Babylon before Marciano and his mafia get it. There's a bunch of sci-fi stuff, motorcycle chases, gods, aliens, and even a smidge of inflation. I'm not going to go over the entire plot of this film. I think it'd be better if you watch it for yourself, but that's just a brief summary of what I could understand from this film. Also, let's not forget that this film shows that Lupin's actually bald. Bald Lupin is something I never want to see again. Jesus Christ. But for now, I think it's time we actually take a look at some of the pros of this movie. And boy, there sure are pros. One of them. So I really like the music, and that's all I can really say this movie has going for it. I mean, there's also the opening sequence, but I already went into detail about that, so let's talk about the music. I think this is quite possibly the best the Pink Jacket era of Lupin could do, since the bars were already lowered from the beginning, not from the very start. Sexy Adventure is a guilty pleasure of a song, but we finally get a taste of this era's main theme, and it's not bad actually. Yeah, for some reason, Part 3 and by extension the Pink Jacket saga couldn't use the traditional Lupin III theme due to licensing issues. Yomiuri TV, the network that aired the series, didn't seem to have the rights to all the classic songs, unlike Nippon TV, so they went out of their way to make original songs as well. Overall, there's nothing really else to note here in terms of pros. I mean, there's not much to say here other than Goemon cuts lightning, and that's all I can think of. Woo! And now for something else. The cons of this movie. I'm gonna get this out of the way briefly. I think some of the stereotypes looking back seem so poorly aged. Like, I know it was the 80s and stuff, but I just think personally that stuff like this seems harmful and just not good to look back at. With that out of the way, I just think this movie's all over the place for the most part. Sure, it follows a half-decent plot, but honestly, it feels like we were jumping from one place to another, unlike Mystery Amamo and Castle of Cagliostro. First we're here, then we're here, and ooh, now we're here. Sure, it focuses on the major characters starting with Lupin, then Fujiko, then Zenigata, and yeah, this movie's just all over the place. Okay, so with that out of the way, I think it's safe for me to say that I've reached a final verdict on this movie. Unlike Mystery Amamo and Castle of Cagliostro, which both had their fair share of iconic moments, I can see why Gold of Babylon is forgotten about. I feel like it doesn't have the same substance as the previous two movies. It tries to give itself iconic moments, but falls flat in its attempts. There are still some good moments here. The scene where Lupin takes the treasure is probably my favorite of the bunch, especially with the Lupin theme, which finally got a rendition specifically for this film. Tangent aside, I feel like there was no saving this movie in terms of its current status, being lumped in with the often forgotten about Part 3 of the anime, which is a shame because I really like Pink Jacket Lupin. It's just a shame that many people choose to skip the era of Lupin as a whole. Though looking at how this movie is with the stereotypes, jumbled plots, and how try-hard it is at being an iconic film, I can kind of see why it's definitely the weakest of the classic trilogy in terms of how it's structured. Don't get me wrong, I really hate to give negative reviews on media I like given previous experiences. But personally, when a movie is less than okay, I guess somebody has to say something about it. And as somebody who looked at Lupin movies in the past, this might be the worst one I've talked about so far. I don't know, it's just below average. That being said, that doesn't mean I outright hate it. I still enjoyed myself here. The music is sublime here. It's probably the best Part 3 soundtrack in my opinion, and the bar wasn't already set that high. There's still a few good moments here, such as, like I've stated before, the part where Lupin escapes with the treasure, and then there's the scene where Goemon cuts a lightning bolt in half, and yeah, that's all I can really say about Legend of the Gold of Babylon. I mean, what more do you want me to say aside from being strange? It's definitely the weakest movie of the bunch thus far. But despite this, there was a part of me that really wanted to like it. After all, it is part of the Pink Jacket saga, which houses my favorite Lupin design. But I don't know, I couldn't really gel well with the idea of this film. I think this movie still has its fans, sure, and I know the comments are going to be filled with people saying that my opinions suck. But for me, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can really call this a good film. It's below average at best. I know I said that this movie doesn't have iconic moments, but even if it did have iconic moments, I feel like it wouldn't be considered a good movie either way, given that there's not much to say here other than it's the weakest of the 3 Lupin movies I've looked at so far. And that's pretty much all I can say without angering more people. So with that out of the way, I'm gonna mentally prepare myself for when I take a look at the Fuma conspiracy, and after that, I'm taking a break from the Lupin III franchise because after Fuma conspiracy, aside from a few TV specials, which I do want to look at in the near future, there's an 8-year gap between that and 1995's Farewell to Nostradamus. And I've already got a bad case of Lupin fever with this movie, so if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna take a break now. Good night and big balls.